evening, everyone. You're very welcome to this Let's Talk Sheep webinar. I'm your host for tonight, Ciaran Lynch. And this will be the first in our series of webinars where we'll be discussing some key topics of relevance in the lead up to lambing this year. And for tonight's webinar, we're going to focus on two key areas around management and housing and some key aspects in nutrition. I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues, Michael Gottstein and Damian Costello. Gentlemen, you're very welcome on.
Thanks, Ciaran. Thanks, Ciaran.
Thanks, Damian. Yeah. Good evening.
Look, it's been a difficult year in terms of housing. It's probably snuck up on us a lot quicker than we expected. It's certainly the gift has kept on giving, so it has. So I think both of you are going to cover kind of some practical tips around it, some of the kind of pitfalls and areas to watch out for, as well as some key advice around nutrition or maybe managing ewes that went in this year in poor conditions. So look, it should be interesting enough. Damien, I might just get you to start sharing your screen. You're up first.
Yeah.
We can see the slides coming in. Look, we're going to try and keep this interactive. So if you have any questions for the attendees there, feel free to put them in the Q&A tab. I'll ask them on your behalf. Damien's going to take the first session around housing. Then Michael's going to come in the second half around nutrition. So we'll take some of Damien's questions maybe at the halfway point and we can have a discussion afterwards. So feel free to put your questions in the Q&A tab. Yep, you're on full screen. So look, Damien, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'll join you again halfway through it and we'll see what you're covering.
Okay, thanks very much, Ciaran, and good evening, everybody. Just as Ciaran outlined there, between myself and Michael this evening, an outline of what we're going to cover, I suppose managing body condition, in particular at this time of the year, given the difficult year we've had, we're going to focus a little bit on sheep housing and the management of sheep around housing, and finishing off then with some bit on feeding management and nutrition and feeding plans and so on. As Ciaran outlined at the start, there's no need to remind anybody, 2023 has been a particularly difficult year on sheep. The story of the year has been rainfall. I saw some figures recently there that here in Athenry, in July there was 254% of the normal rainfall, and it was 119% for August. So there was a huge amount of rainfall in the second half of the year. This led to lower grass dry matter. Sheep were consuming grass that was only 12 or 13% dry matter. This, I suppose, in turn, as everybody knows, led to poor enough and challenging lamb thrive. And I suppose the knock on to that was that people found themselves coming up to mating time, which was in less than ideal body condition, or certainly less than they would have been in previous years. Then, I suppose, coming into the autumn, I suppose grass supply appeared to be as normal, but what people were finding that it was disappearing quite quick. And, people's grass supplies dwindled maybe earlier than expected. And again, this was in part due to kind of the very poor underfoot conditions leading to poor utilisation. I suppose just as an introduction, in terms of body condition score, when we talk about body condition score and measuring body condition score, we're talking about a scale of 1 to 5, with the score of 3 to 3.5 being the ideal at this time of year. Really, as we always say, I suppose it's not about getting so hung up on whether a ewe is at 3 or 3.25 or 3.5. The key thing is that you're able to maybe pick out what ewes are thin. So even if you put it on a scale of 10, fit and fat, where you're hoping that most of your ewes are in the fit category, but that involves putting your hand through the wool and handling each sheep to pick out those thin ewes. You won't do it by just visually looking at them. Just to recap on a few of the targets, I suppose, we set out in terms of a body condition score. The idea would be that you build up the ewes to a body condition score of 3.5. That's the target average. And again, keeping the range as tight as possible so that you've addressed the issues of the thinner ewes in the 10 or 12 weeks prior to mating, in order to get them as high a proportion as possible of the ewes at or near enough the target. You'd like to think that you'd have few enough ewes under 3. And again, look at it as the season progresses right up to scanning. The idea would be that you'd maintain that body condition insofar as possible, and again addressing any issues you'd have with outliers or that. After lambing, again, the energy demand in the ewe pretty much doubles compared to her energy demand prior to lambing. So you would expect that you'll drop a bit of body condition because she's milking off her back to meet her energy requirements and to do a good job on the lambs she's rearing. So just, I suppose, maybe as an example this is an example of two commercial farms where we collected body condition scores from the entire ewe flock just prior to mating. And I suppose at a glance you might say, well, one farm is at an average of 3, the second farm is an average of 3.5. It doesn't appear that there's a major difference. The flock represented by the green bars is a flock that pays very close attention to monitoring body condition score right throughout the year. And as a result, I suppose you'll find that the range is quite tight. Their average, yes, is 3.5. But when you look at the numbers at a condition score of 2.75, you'll see straight away that there's a very small proportion of the flock represented by the green bar in that 2.75 category, and the majority of the flock is at 3 or greater. So that is ideally where you'd like to be. When you look at the flock that's represented by the red bars, if we take this section here and look at the ewes that are condition score 2 or 2.5 and below, we're looking here that there's a third of this flock that's in trouble in terms of body condition score. So that is, as I say, on the point of mating. Probably the lower down outliers may not have been turned out to the ram, but maybe these group that were around 2.5 at mating time, is there something we can do maybe to build a little bit of body condition score on those particular ewes? So most March lambing ewes are in the mid pregnancy stage at this stage of the season. From once those ewes get into the late pregnancy, the last maybe 8 weeks prior to lambing, the chances of building body condition score at that stage are very slim. That ship has sailed, really, because the ewe at that stage, regardless of what nutrition she's on, she will be directing most of that nutrition towards the growing lambs. At this stage, though, it's not too late. It's good management practice to maybe separate out the thin ewes from the group, as I say, picking out the thinner ones and giving them preferential treatment. So what are the options? They can be put into the shed on silage, and maybe a small bit of concentrates if the silage quality is not what you'd like it to be. Other people will take the option of having them outdoors and maybe supplementing them with a bale outside. Again, important that you ensure that you're cross compliant if you're feeding outdoors to the ewes. But the important thing is that they're separated out and they're treated and they're given preferential treatment. And some of you on tonight might say, where's he going with concentrates this early? We're only talking about the thin ewes at this stage. You're picking out the small percentage of ewes, hopefully, in the flock that's thin, and you're not overfeeding them. You're feeding maybe 300 to 500 grams per head per day, along with fairly good quality silage, or as good a quality silage as you have. And if you're doing this maybe for 40 to 50 days up to the time of scanning, you're talking about in the region of 5 to 8 euros per head. So it's not a massive cost, and the benefit of it will be if you can build a little bit of body condition, that they're not lambing down in very poor condition. Again, as we know, the knock-on effect, if you have a high proportion of ewes that lamb down in poor body condition, you'll have very poor milk yield, you'll have poor mothering ability, you'll have lots of headaches and lots of problems. If the weather is particularly poor, probably the preferred option is indoors, because they're not using up energy to more or less keep themselves warm and that. So it's easier to put on a bit of body condition in house ewes. Again, this year, it's no secret that the availability of straw is tight, and the cost of it, even if you can get it, the cost of it is high as well. So the people will be tempted maybe to delay housing as a result of this, and maybe they have some straw, or they're trying to make a stretch or whatever. So again, in this situation, I suppose you must prioritise what ewes you have to house first. If you're going for a sort of a gradual approach to housing, I don't think the solution is to say, look, I'm not going housing, or I'm keeping them out a month longer and not doing anything any different. And an absolute no-no, I suppose, is regrazing fields that you've already closed up for spring grass. You know, that grass will be far more valuable to you in the springtime, and don't be tempted to use that in order to keep the ewes out a bit longer. So where I suppose where housing capacity maybe it can be an issue as well, but also where there's maybe limited straw, the first priority in terms of housing would be the thin ewes, because if you leave them outside with the main group, it's only thinner they will get. Secondly, maybe you'd be looking at older ewes. They're maybe more likely to have teeth issues, where they would suffer a dip in body condition as a result. When we get as far as scanning, then I suppose maybe the next batch you would be housing would be maybe the triplet bearing ewes, because pretty much fairly soon after scanning you'll be introducing concentrate supplementation to those ewes in order to meet their energy demands in the run up to lambing. And again, if you've done your rattling fairly successfully post scanning, maybe you can look at the first colour, whether let's say it was yellow, that you can house the yellow ewes. So that's maybe maybe just an example of how you might stagger the housing in that fashion. Again, down at the bottom of the page, there's a table there from the Department of Agriculture as a guideline to the straw requirement per 100 days. You can see that I suppose it's a good bit less, I suppose, if you're feeding hay or haylage type. And again, I suppose if you're trying to make best use of the available straw, if you're under the amount you need. The other important thing to bear in mind, I suppose, that your sheep housing is well ventilated. If you have a poorly ventilated building, you'll find it difficult to keep that bedding dry because there's a damp atmosphere in the shed, and there's health issues, I suppose, alongside that as well. Important, I suppose, to try and get as you're housing your groups of sheep, you can get them as dry as possible. Get the fleeces dry. If you house very wet sheep, you know, your first bedding will go fairly quick. Again, some people use lime, particularly along the barriers, just before you bed. You know, other people are using putting sawdust underneath, and it can be a help, I suppose, in terms of stretching the straw that's available. So I suppose moving on then maybe to talk a little bit about sheep housing, and what are the key challenges we're coming across in sheep housing. Firstly, I suppose overcrowded pens, and in particular in a straw bedded situation, you'll struggle to keep the bedding into them. You'll struggle to keep the bedding clean. It also, I suppose, encourages bullying. The more dominant sheep in the pen will tend to bully the lighter ewes. So again, in this situation, the thinner ewes are getting thinner, and they're not certainly putting on body condition. The second thing, I suppose, that's important to examine, and we'll talk about the recommended feed space and floor space, but not enough feed space. The ewes that are less inclined to compete for feed will suffer where there isn't enough of feed space. And again, the stronger ewes and the more dominant ewes will get there first. And again, the knock-on effect to this is that you can have issues such as prolapse, and also the metabolic diseases such as twin lamb disease and milk fever can be an issue, because just if there's lack of feed space, all ewes are not getting a fair crack at it. Again, I mentioned already in terms of issues with sheep housing, if you have poor ventilation in the shed, you'll have a sort of a constant damp atmosphere there, and again, you're using more straw as a result. And as I already mentioned as well, there's associated health issues with poorly ventilated buildings, and that there isn't the airflow to take harmful pathogens out of the environment. Other issues is maybe insufficient feed space for forage. It's important that you have a system in place that you can get constant access to the forage that you're feeding, and that is in front of them all the time. You're not allowing them to run out of it. Other issues with water, all very well having water trucks in each pen, but are they cleaned out regularly? Because they do get dirty, and it's something to keep a check on, particularly in the later stages of pregnancy when ewes are up on a high level of concentrate feed. They have a very high demand for water. In slatted pens, I suppose, again, sometimes it can be a challenge keeping the slatted areas clean. Again, depending on the forage that they're eating, if it's precision chop silage, less of the material will be pulled in. We know though that in a lot of sheep farms, it's bale silage that's being fed in sheds. So again, regular cleaning out of any material that's pulled in at the feed face is a big help in terms of keeping this clean. And I know it's a chore, but it is worth doing before it gets a chance to block up the slats. Again, we'll have a look in a second at the recommendations. There's slightly less for slatted floors versus straw bedded floors, but important to check the floor space. It's a good idea. So these are based on the Department of Agriculture S146 spec, the minimum floor space requirements. So this is the floor area they require. The large bodied ewes, the 85-90 kg ewes, they require 1.2 meters squared per head on slats. On the bedded, the straw bedded area, they require 1.4. And you can see down along the medium-sized ewe are slightly less requirements for that. Again, these are minimum requirements. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit of extra floor space. Some people often ask us, what about if we keep the ewes and lambs in after lambing? If you ewe with a single lamb, you add 30% onto the figures above on the table above, and if it's a ewe that's rearing twins, it's 60% over the above. If you're in the practice on your farm of winter shearing, they require 15 to 20% less floor space because of the fact that they're shorn just on the point of housing or just after being housed. In terms of the feed space requirement, and it's a really important one to get right, and it's a useful exercise to actually physically take out the measuring tape and get someone with you to actually measure the feed space and not just to assume that you have enough. All ewes must be comfortably able to eat meal together. Very often we find when people maybe 6 or 8 weeks out from lambing with the likes of triplet bearing ewes, when they start feeding, it appears that they have loads of space, but it's not any smaller those ewes are getting from there on in. It's, they will be getting bulkier. So again, for the large frame ewe, for meal feeding, you're talking about 600 millimeters per head is the recommended allocation. And it's important to check that. The photo, it's not a great photo, but the photo here in the corner, it is important to take account where you have walk-through feed tracks, that at the corners, there's going to be about 600 millimeters blanked off. Say if there's ewes feeding across the front face, they will blank off the first space or two in the walk-through track. So what we do in calculating the total feed space available is to take off 600 millimeters per corner when you're feeding on two sides of the pen, and it's if you have a three-sided feed, you're taking another 600 for the other corner. Some people ask us then, I suppose, in terms of sheep that are outwintered, again 300 to 500 millimeters of track space per ewe. That's assuming that they have access to feed on both sides of tracks in a field. So again, it's really important. And again, as I mentioned earlier on, the feeding space is really important from the point of view of metabolic diseases and also incidences of prolapse as well. Just in terms, I suppose, of the management at housing, it's important, and most people have done this already. It's important that your sheep housing has been cleaned out well in advance. You've done any power washing or disinfecting or whatever you want to do. Lots of people will put down a covering of lime as well on the floor before the bedding. So having the shed ready in good time, and also having it allowed it to dry out properly is really good practice. I mentioned already the risks with housing sheep with wet fleeces. Along with, I suppose, the fact that the bedding won't last too long. You know, there are other risks in terms of pneumonia or those type of things. So it is, insofar as possible, I suppose, if you can have sheep reasonably dry when they're housed. It's easier said than done, I suppose, with the weather we've been getting. Really important, I suppose, that you address any lameness issues before you house sheep. All ewes should be put through the footpath before housing. And again, it's important, where possible, do not house lame sheep, because if you just turn in lame sheep, particularly if it's infectious lameness such as foot rot, it will just go through the shed. It'll spread rapidly inside. So pick out the lame ewes at that stage, treat them appropriately. Again, on veterinary advice, if you need to use an antibiotic for certain infections, and wait until the infection is fully cleared up before you house them. If you're in a situation where you must house them, separate them out and at least put them in a pen of their own, so that they're not spreading it throughout the flock. The worst case scenario, I suppose, you can have is if you have a couple of lame sheep in every pen in the shed, they have a great chance of spreading it. Again, when we talk about penning ewes and dividing them up, as mentioned earlier at the start, you certainly be taking out the ewes in poorer body condition, and putting them, maybe housing them first and getting them on a fairly good, as the best quality silage, I suppose, is available. And if it's required, a little bit of additional concentrates. After scanning, we'll be grouping them, obviously, based on litter size. And again, if you've done your addling, as mentioned earlier, you know, the later lambing ewes can be penned separately, or even if you're delaying the housing for some of them, they can be maybe remain outdoors for a couple of weeks longer. Again, from a practical point of view, sometimes that seems like an awful lot of pens in a shed. But for example, if you have a group of triplets, you may pick out the twins that are in a little bit behind in terms of body condition, and they can be put in with the triplets, because they certainly can be put on a higher feeding regime, and you'll be starting feeding them that little bit longer. Again, using adequate straw. I know, as I said, the availability never some of it, but you know, it's still not good practice to skimp on it in terms of keeping the environment clean. And very often, as I say, using the likes of lime, especially along feed barriers, can be a help in keeping the environment drier. So, Ciaran, I think I'll leave it at that, and I'll just stop sharing here, and
that's
Michael will take up the story.
Thank you. Look, I think you cover a lot of practical elements of it. Just when Michael's getting ready to share, just remind everyone again, if you have any questions for Damian and Michael, feel free to put them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, and I'll ask them. Damian, just maybe when Michael's getting ready, look, something we talk about the whole time, feed space. You brought it up again there. It's probably fair to say at the moment, like, if we looked at our pens and we say that's 600 mils for them large ewes, it looks a lot, but in reality, you know, you have to count for what they're going to be in them final couple of weeks. It's one of the kind of pitfalls we see commonly.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, as I said, it is a very useful exercise. I mean, sometimes you'd be inclined to say, well, I always put 20 ewes in that pen, or I always, you know, and even within a shed, sometimes whatever design features, even taking the walkthrough, it's maybe it's all in one bay of the shed, for example. It makes one bay of the shed that few feet smaller. So it is good practice to take it to measure it out. And you know, there are other options. It's sometimes getting the balance between the floor space and the feed space is a challenge. But you know, it can be as simple maybe as a simple sort of a hang-on trough on the other side of the pen that you can feed two sides, and you can get around to put a bit. And you know, that little hang-on track that'll feed 3 or 4 ewes can make all the difference from it being putting sheep under serious pressure versus kind of they can all comfortably eat. And as you rightly said, the when you start feeding maybe 6 or 8 weeks out from lambing, it all looks rosy and it looks like there's loads of space and that there's never going to be a problem. But as you say, they're getting much bulkier as you get nearer to lambing, and it's then the issues can arise.
It can change. So look, it's something I'm sure we'll come back to then. So again, look, Q&A tabs at the bottom of the screen, finally. Michael, I might just get you to turn on your camera and I'll mute there. So Michael, you're going to, we kind of cover the housing element, you're going to cover now the kind of key areas around nutrition.
Yep, that's right, Ciaran. Good evening, everybody. Ciaran, can you hear me? Just give me a thumbs up if you can. Yep, okay. Very good. So look, I'm going to talk a little bit about the nutrition side of things, and I suppose I'm focusing on the latter part of pregnancy, really, and looking for an awful lot of flocks, I suppose, that are lambing in kind of the end of February and March. This is information that is maybe a little bit early for you. So a lot of those flocks are probably more kind of in the area that Damian was talking about mid-pregnancy. But I suppose there are a proportion of flocks that are getting, you know, ready to lamb, I suppose, towards the end of this month, maybe even some lambing already, you know, and lambing in January. And I suppose those ewes are now in that kind of, you know, 4 to 6 weeks before lambing, and for them kind of, you know, late pregnancy nutrition becomes very important. And look at, I suppose, this first table I have here is a table from Frank O'Mara, some of his work done 20 odd years ago now at this stage. And it looks at basically the energy requirement for ewes pre-lambing. So look at, I suppose, there is I'm just going to try and change my mouse there if it'll allow me to do that. Pointer options, 1 second now. So you know, most of the ewes, I suppose, that we would see on lowland farms are probably somewhere in that, you know, 75 to 85 kilos there, that kind of a guideline. So these are kind of the sections that we're talking about. And what you can see here is these are energy levels. So these are the required energy levels in UFLs. And 1 UFL is the equivalent energy of what you would find in 1 kilogram of air-dried barley. So what we can see is that as the ewes progress into their pregnancy in the last 6 weeks, the amount of energy that they need increases rapidly. What we also know, I suppose, is that that's a time when we see silage intakes decreasing, and that's because, number one, I suppose farmers are putting in concentrates, so the fact that there's a lot of starch going in there is reducing rumen pH and changing the bugs inside there, and that's reducing, you know, the fiber intake or digestion. And also, I suppose, look at the litter size is the lambs inside and the uterus are growing, and that's probably having a little bit of an impact as well, particularly in kind of twin and triplet bearing ewes on their ability to consume forage. So look at, there's a big increase, and I suppose that's the main message. The actual numbers, I suppose, are maybe not that important. But as you can see that we go in the last 6 weeks, there's a 50% increase in energy intake. And if we looked at that increase, maybe from kind of mid-pregnancy, it's even more. And that's at a time when generally the ewes are starting to eat less silage or hay. So it's very important that ewes are given a little bit of meal at that stage, and that meal increases so that we meet these energy requirements. I mean, Damian already talked about body condition, and one of the things we're seeing on a lot of flocks this year is that body condition score is back a little bit from previous years, and some flocks are in situations where there's quite a few thin ewes and they can't afford to lose body weight. So we really need to make sure that late pregnancy nutrition is adequate to reduce that body condition loss in that kind of final 6 to 8 weeks. So then, I mean, when you look by concentrates, anyone that goes out tomorrow to a merchant or a miller to buy concentrates, you probably won't get an energy rating on the bag. It's not going to be written on the label unless they're voluntarily putting it on there. So what we have is this kind of traffic light system. And the traffic light system basically ranks things in green, orange, or red. So green being the best, orange being kind of intermediate, and red being the kind of poorer quality. ingredients from an energy point of view. So we've ranked them high energy, medium energy, and low energy. And when you're looking at the ration and the makeup of the ration, you kind of can take a stab at how good the energy density of a ration is by looking to see what proportion of the ingredients are in the high bracket, in the medium bracket, and the low bracket. And ideally, I suppose we would like to see all of the ingredients being in the high bracket. No, sometimes that's maybe not very practical. Most of them in the high bracket, and in particular if they're in descending order, the ones that are higher up in the high bracket, a couple of mediums, and if there are more ingredients in the ration which are low energy, that they are pretty far down the line so that the inclusion rate is quite low. Okay, if that's not the case, then obviously the price of that ration needs to reflect that there's a lot of lower energy ingredients in there, and then the farmer will have to feed a little bit more of those to get the same amount of energy into the diet of the ewe. So energy is one thing, and then I suppose the second thing is protein. And these are the crude protein requirements in grams per day for a twin bearing 80 kilogram ewe. And what we can see there, again, look at that as, I suppose ewes in mid-pregnancy probably you're talking about somewhere around 100 grams of crude protein. 6 weeks before lambing, that goes up to about 145. So that's a significant increase. And then I suppose in late pregnancy, we see that going all the way up to 230 grams. And the reason for that, obviously, is that the ewe is bagging down. So she's springing. The lamb is growing very, very rapidly, and that requires protein as well. And then the ewe is producing colostrum and setting herself up for lactation. And all of that is kind of heavy in terms of the requirement for protein, and we need to make sure that there's adequate protein going into the diet there, to meet the needs of the ewe, the lamb, and the colostrum production and the mammary gland development. But I suppose crude protein is one thing, and the second part of that conversation really needs to go around quality. Is all protein the same? And certainly that is not the case. And really, I suppose there's two types of protein. Look, I suppose there's lots and lots of different types of protein, but I suppose we've kind of, just to simplify it here, put it into two different types of protein. So there's rumen degradable protein, or RDP, and that's basically protein that when the ewe eats it, it is broken down by the bugs in the stomach. And then what the ewe is really digesting at that stage then is microbial protein. So the protein that we feed the sheep doesn't really eat. The sheep eats the bug and the bugs that are produced by breaking down that protein, or the microbial protein. There's a limit to how much of that can be utilized. So it's absolutely necessary that a proportion of the protein is RDP. Because that's what the bugs need to multiply and grow and digest the grass and help the ewe to break down the grass. And excess protein is excreted in the urine, and that uses energy in the process. So feeding huge amounts of RDP over and above what the ewe needs is wasteful, insofar as that it burns up energy. And look, in practice, what people say is you probably would need to go over kind of 24% protein in the diet before you get to that stage where it would have a significant impact. So that's probably unlikely to happen on most farms. The one, I suppose, that's the second type of protein is this digestible undegradable protein, or DUP. And that's basically protein that when it goes into the rumen where the bugs are, it's not broken down by the bugs. So it's protein that really passes through the rumen undigested and is then digested in the intestine in the same way that monogastrics would break down protein, even like ourselves, humans would break down protein in that type of a fashion. And that's important in terms of colostrum milk production, and also immunity, maintaining immunity to parasites as well. So it's quite an important source of protein, and like all good things, I suppose, it can be hard enough to get it into the ration, or it's a little bit more expensive, to put in there. So when we talk about that, I've mentioned the 200 grams a day. The quality, we're talking about kind of 40 to 55 grams of DUP per head per day. And so really from a practical point of view, it's about looking at what ingredients in the ration are going to supply you with DUP, this digestible undegradable protein. And soybean meal is probably the best one that's there at the moment on the market. And generally, we would recommend that, if people are happy to go with a soybean meal, that about 100 grams of soybean meal per lamb carried in the last 2 weeks will supply adequate DUP. Soybean is quite expensive this year. I think people are kind of talking on figures of kind of 560, 570 plus per ton. Obviously, there'll be huge variation on that across the country, depending on when it was bought, what quantities you're buying, how you're buying it, all that type of thing. Protected rapeseed is probably, the second best. And look at, we don't see an awful lot of that around. So that's basically generally rapeseed that has been heat treated to try and protect it from being broken down by the bugs in the rumen. Our maize distillers also has a quite a good DUP profile, not as much as in soybean meal or the protected rapeseed. Just the issues to watch with distillers is that it can be high in copper. And it's also quite high in oil, so that kind of limits how much you can include in the ration. So I suppose from a practical point of view, for most people, it's probably in that soybean meal region with maybe little bits of these if they are available. So I suppose that brings me on to the whole area of how much do we feed. So I've talked a little bit about the requirements of the ewe, and then I've talked about the what are good sources of energy, what types of protein would we like to see, and how we can source those. And then I suppose the next question, or the question we often ask, is how much should I be feeding? And this is a table. Look, there's lots of these tables knocking around over the years. They're all pretty similar, giving recommendations. And on the left-hand side here, you can see is the silage quality. So we've got our 75 DMD silage. From there up, we'd be considering that to be quite good. Silage, your 60 or your 70 DMD silage, which is, reasonable silage, and then going into the kind of poor quality silage, your 65, 60s, and 55s, which would be quite poor. And really, I suppose the important message from this particular slide would be that, most farmers will have 3 or 4 different batches of silage, maybe a first cut, a second cut, maybe a couple of paddocks that were taken out, that type of thing. So there's various different silages that have been made, and they'll all be different qualities depending on, the time of year they were cut, the field they were taken from, what stage the grass was at, how good the weather was when we were ensiling them, and all those type of things will come into it. So I suppose really the message is here, if you have really good quality silage, maybe paddocks that were taken out, good, nice leafy grass, harvested in good conditions, with a bit of a wilt, that have ensiled pretty well, and you can identify those, test the different batches of silage that are on the farm, and prioritize them then according to the quality. So if we have this really high quality silage up here, then we should be targeting that maybe to feed the ewes in the last 6 weeks of pregnancy to reduce down the amount of meal that we have. Maybe if we have poor quality silage down around here, the 65s, and we have suckler cows that are dry, calving in the springtime, we could target that at those, and maybe use the 70 DMD silage as an intermediate silage to be feeding ewes in maybe up to about 8 weeks prior to lambing, and then switch to the higher quality. So there's obviously benefits in doing that if you can allocate the higher quality silage to the ewes at a time when they really need the higher quality feed, which is in the last 6 to 8 weeks prior to lambing. You can reduce the amount of meal, and that's what we're seeing here. So with really high quality silage, we start feeding 6 weeks out, and at about 0.1 of a kilo, or 0.1 of a kilo sometimes can be hard enough to allocate. Maybe go 0.2 and go 0.3 here. And then basically we're feeding about 20 kilos of meal. So if you do the sums on that, it works out at about 15, but all the ewes are not going to lamb on the first day of the lambing period. So it's roughly around 20 kilograms per ewe is what we'll be allocating with that type of high quality silage. As you can see, as the silage quality decreases, the amount of meal we need to feed increases. So we feed more and we start feeding earlier. So with the 70 DMD, we're probably starting 8 weeks out. With the 65 DMD and 60 DMDs, we're starting 10 weeks out. You know, and I suppose that's important as well, that if there are people out there that have these poor quality silages this year, and, you know, certainly it was a very wet summer and more difficult for people to make silage, then look at they need to start feeding earlier. Because these are the targets for ewes in good body condition. And again, as Damian was saying earlier, you know, there's quite a number of ewes out there maybe that are not in good body condition. And in those situations, feeding will probably have to start a little bit earlier. Okay, so look, that's a general guideline there. And I suppose the main take-home message from that is, you know, if you have different batches of silage, test it and make sure that you're using the highest quality silage, you know, closest to lambing. And also, I suppose, if you do, when you test your silage, find out that you have really moderate quality stuff, that you start feeding that little bit early. So then look at, I suppose, in terms of feeding management, you know, one thing is, I suppose, feed quality and feed quantity. But the second thing then is, how do we manage it? Like, you know, and having constant access to roughage. Here you can see sheep inside a sheep house, and, you know, there's lots of feed in front of them. What we find very often, you know, as they're going through it, and sheep are divils, I suppose, for sorting ingredients, trying to pick out the leafier grass or the leafier bits of the silage or hay first. And while they're doing that, they tend to be nosing the silage away from them all the time. And especially with, you know, haylage or hay, in that situation, you can find that, you know, very quickly the sheep have pushed it all out here and they can't get at it. So having access to it is very important, you know. So whether, if we're feeding kind of wet or heavier silage, it's harder for them to push it away and nose it away. If it's lighter stuff that they're easily pushing away, keeping it pushed in regularly, you know, is very, very important. Remove the refuses or stale material twice weekly, and there's two reasons for that. Is if we force them to eat the stale material, we're probably reducing intake and the digestibility of the overall diet. But also, I suppose, with silages and what we see when silage goes stale, you know, it starts heating, and then if there's any bit of soil contamination, we can get listeria, and that's not something we want to have contaminating the fresh silage coming in. So removing that is quite important. In terms of concentrate feed, when we start introducing it, introduce it in time and build it up gradually. So that's going back to the table on the previous slide. Last thing we want to do is you know, start too late and then having to build it up really, really quickly and get digestive upsets in the ewes, particularly as they get close to lambing. That kind of predisposes them to things like prolapse and milk fever and twin lamb disease and all those kind of things. Once we go over a half a kilo a day, feed twice daily. So, and that's really important, and that's where we see a lot of problems every year, that people are trying to reduce workload on farms, and that's understandable. A lot of sheep farmers work off the farm, you know, and it's a busy time of year when all the stock are inside, and you're trying to kind of limit the amount of jobs. But once you go over a half a kilo of concentrate, you should be splitting that in 2 feeds 8 hours apart, and that's just to kind of help manage rumen pH and this subacute kind of acidosis that we see if we're going up to higher levels, and it's to maximize forage intake as well, you know. Consistent feeding times, and look, that's going back to the 8 hours between 2 feeds. And then look at, Damian already mentioned this, check and clean out the drinkers, and really that needs to be done at least weekly, okay? And you know, depends on where the feeders are situated and all that type of thing. Maybe even more often, you know, we'll just remove any feces and silage and straw that has been deposited into the feeders, just and give them fresh water. Separate out shy feeders, you know, or in particular have enough trough space there for everything. And again, Damian mentioned that, but if we have shy feeders and maybe a couple of ewes that are bad on their feet or are lame or carrying a lot of lambs, 3 lambs, and they're not getting in there for their fair share, pull them out and manage them as a separate group, and that'll pay dividends in terms of preventing them ewes from going down with twin lamb disease or prolapsing or that type of thing, you know, or losing an awful lot of body condition and lambing down with little or no milk. Avoid sudden changes in diet, and that's very important, particularly as we approach lambing time, that we don't want to be causing any digestive upsets, because once you have a digestive upset, what happens is they will stop feeding, and ewes that are heavily pregnant, when they stop feeding, that creates an awful lot of trouble in terms of predisposing them to some of those metabolic diseases that we've talked about, twin lamb disease, milk fever, prolapse, all of those type of things. And in particular, be very careful if we're housing ewes just before lambing. So very often we would come across a case where farmers ringing in and, they've had a lot of grass or maybe had forage crops or something like that, and they leave the ewes out as long as they possibly can, and then they house them very close to lambing. And there's a sudden change of diet. We're going from a grass-based diet to a silage. Maybe meal wasn't introduced in time, and then a lot of ewes, go down with kind of twin lamb disease, milk fever, and it's the digestive upset. So if we are in the fortunate position that we have lots of grass or forage crops outside that ewes can stay out onto for long periods of time, and they're coming in shortly before lambing, we really need to make sure that those ewes are acclimatized to the indoor diet, so that while they're outside, they're getting silage and they're on the meal that we're going to be switching them on onto when they come indoors, so that there's very minimum change for the ewes in late pregnancy when they're coming into the shed. So look I suppose that's my last slide really here. I'm kind of summarizing really what both myself and Damian have discussed. Body condition is a really good proxy for how things are going. So the really important thing there is to monitor that, and you can't do that from looking in over the fence or looking in over the pen. You have to handle the ewes, and if condition is slipping, need to act there in time. And really look, if there's lots of research out there to show that ewes that lose a lot of body condition in late pregnancy, they have worse outcomes in terms of being able to successfully rear their lambs to weaning time. Check the sheds for floor space and feeding space, and we often find that farmers tend to squeeze an extra ewe or two into the pen, and look at early on, maybe you might get away with that, but certainly as we get closer to lambing, ewes get bigger, and that creates problems. So I would say, get out that measuring tape, have a look at those figures there that Damian was going through, the feed space and the lying space. Generally, it's the feed space that's limiting on most farms. There usually is enough lying space for ewes, where our cot is on the feed space. And if you're caught on the feed space, on the trough space, hang a few troughs, put a few extra tucks into the pen. It's not a huge amount of extra effort, but it'll pay dividends in terms of making sure that ewes get their fair share and reducing the incidence of prolapse and things like that. And then lastly, look at what I've been talking about for the last 15 or 20 minutes. Is ensure good feeding management and nutrition, and that's everything from ensuring that we have, are feeding the best quality silage late in pregnancy, that we're feeding a high quality, energy dense concentrate with good protein and sufficient protein to make sure that those ewes are lambing down, and that they're not nutritionally challenged, and as well as the quality of the nutrition, the management around that, so that they have access to the forage for as much of the day of the 24-hour period as we possibly can. That the water is clean, and all of those type of things. So look, that's me finished, Ciaran. So back to you again, and thanks everybody for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks for that, Michael. I might just get you to stop sharing. So just a quick reminder for attendees, we have some questions in already. Just for anyone who has any questions, put them in the Q&A tab below. Michael, I might just get you to mute for a second, just get you to check your microphone and input on it. Look, Damian, I'll give Michael a break there for a second. I might just start with you with the questions. Look, you mentioned lameness. We've looked at a winter where a lot of ewes would have went in earlier, maybe bedding is a bit tighter. Could you maybe just offer me a couple of your key tips on keeping lameness at bay?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, as you said, it's probably a year where maybe sheep will be possibly in for that bit longer. Again, going through the sheep before you house them, making sure that you treat appropriately, separate out the lame sheep, treat them appropriately. Foot bath again as a preventative method. The remainder of the flock pre-housing. You're you may need to, for the clinical cases, you may need to chat to your vet to get the appropriate antibiotic, and don't introduce them in with other sheep until they're fully cleared up. If you must house them, as I mentioned earlier on, maybe to house them in a separate pen of their own. The other thing, I suppose, sometimes people ask the question about foot bathing during the housing period. Look, you'll have ewes out a couple of times, maybe into the handling yard. There's no problem in foot bathing ewes in the late pregnancy period. But once it's done in a careful way, you're not running them around the yard or anything like that. So for once due care is taken and there's no obvious obstacles that are ran through tight gaps or that. And it is a good idea to do them if you have them out for their clostridial booster, to put them through the foot bath at that stage will help them, maintain it's a preventative, I suppose, as much as anything. But yeah, those are the few things I think here. Lime is useful, I suppose, from the point of view of keeping the bedding dry, and particularly in areas that are along the feed face where they spend a lot of their time, in particular concentrating on those areas. But it's a big help, and maybe around drinkers and that. So it keeps the atmosphere dry, and it's less conducive to lameness and the spread of lameness.
No, I think you're 100% right. Look at treatment support and look at the very basics there: segregate and reduce nervous or infection. You put them ewes in a separate pen. You're starting to cut down that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Look, I have a question. I might just throw this one to both of you, and maybe you'll comment on it from the two different aspects you covered. Look, prolapse is one of the issues we see in farms. Maybe, Damian, I might ask you just comment on it from a point of view of, housing management, feed space, and maybe Michael, just from a nutritional point of view, maybe the risk of acidosis or how that can contribute to it. Yeah. So Damian, maybe just you first, like from the pen space point of view.
Yeah. Again, look at, as I say, the pen space, as far as we can see from situations we're coming across on the farm, it's one of the main things you can attribute to prolapse. And we mentioned it earlier on, I suppose, that when you start to feed concentrates, it may appear that there's lots of space and that they've loads of room and there's no big issue. As I said earlier on, check each pen to see that they have adequate and make the adjustments. And I suppose just the other comment you'd have, Ciaran, is where you're feeding on maybe two sides of the pen, it's important that you can distribute that meal in a fairly lively fashion, that you're not maybe going all along the front barrier and then starting going up and down the middle barrier street. Each group of sheep as a separate group, and get the meal out to them as lively as you possibly can. So it is certainly a big factor to me.
Okay. So Mike, then just like from a feeding point of view, like Damian's covered the kind of practical aspects of being overcrowded, and that certainly contributes to it. You touched on aspects of this, like the risk of acidosis. Can that contribute to prolapse?
Yeah, excuse me. Definitely. Ciaran, I suppose, look at anything that slows down the digestion of fibre in the rumen. Basically, the rumen is like a big vat with bugs inside there that are chomping up this forage and breaking it down and enabling the ewe to digest it and pass it out. And that process, I suppose, and the speed of that process allows or facilitates how much forage the ewe can eat. And once you start dumping starch, and sugars into the rumen, you change the rumen microflora and you change those bugs. A lot of those bugs that are digesting the grass basically die off because the rumen becomes somewhat more acidic, and then obviously that digestion stops, and the forage that's there, the movement of that through the rumen slows down, and that, obviously if the ewe is continuously eating, can cause pressure there. So look at what we say is anything that upsets the digestive system of the ewe in late pregnancy predisposes them to those kind of metabolic diseases, prolapse, milk fever, twin lamb disease. They're probably somewhat linked, as well.
That just actually leads nicely into it, because like if we think about it from the aspects of your milk fever you touched on, and it goes back to what Damian raised earlier, penning them to ewes separately, maybe looking at the ones that are bullying or the shyer feeders, the little practical things we can do. Often make a comment that them 10 minutes after feeding and just observing what happens in the pens can help you identify some of those problems.
Absolutely. And if you think back to last lambing or any lambing, where is the time tied up? Okay, I know there's a lot of time at lambing with lambing ewes and doing everything, but it's those problem sheep. It's the sheep that have the acidosis, the sheep that lamb down with no milk. They're the ones where a lot of time is, where we have to intervene. The ewe that has two lambs, pops them out, has loads of suck, and they go off. They spend maybe 24 or 48 hours in an individual pen, then they're out in the field. There's no bother with them. It's the ones that and what we're trying to do is avoid those, so those yolks that are lame, can't get to the truck, they're shy, they're that bit thinner, maybe they're very heavy or but just, carrying 3 or 4 lambs and can't fight their way in. Anything that you can do to separate out those yolks, and prevent them from having, milk fever, twin lamb disease, less colostrum, lower milk yield, all of those type of things. They're beneficial in terms of that they reduce the labour, but they also increase the outcome, the positive outcomes in terms of lamb thrive and subsequent lamb performance.
Okay, so look, we have a couple of questions in Q&A. I'm just going to come to Mike, a few nutrition related ones. That upper feed limit at ½ kilo, is that still applicable when we're feeding outdoors or grass?
Yeah, I think so. Once you were like, grass is no different to silage. I suppose it's a forage based diet, and we're depending on bugs that operate at a relatively high pH. Once you start dumping starch in, you reduce that pH. Now, grass is probably more digestible. So the intake is probably less impacted by it, but certainly once you're going over ½ kilo, look at what I would say is an awful lot of problems we would get where farmers are ringing with lots of ewes prolapsing or going down with that, is where farmers are feeding bigger quantities. Now there are people feeding higher levels of that, and some of them are getting away with it, but some of them are not. And when you're not getting away with it, what you're seeing is prolapses, ewes going down, all that type of stuff, and it's just really not worth it. So we're not feeding. Most farmers will not be feeding levels above 500 grams a day for a long period of time. You are talking about 3 or 4 weeks, and at that stage, you're just switching on to twice a day feeding. So you feed in the morning when you go out. It's not a job that takes an awful long time, and you're feeding again the evening, at least 8 hours later. And that basically leads to happy ewes, and happy ewes leads to happier shepherds.
Certainly true. Less work anyway. Look, I'm going to put kind of bunch 2 questions together here. So we're on feeding singles. Maybe how adequate are high energy buckets on our own, or just going in with an energy supplement such as rolled barley for ewes, either outdoors or maybe indoors and good silage? Is there need to go with the compound protein requirement maybe later on? Just any comments on that?
Yeah. Okay. So look at, I suppose, with singles, we'll start there. I suppose ewes with singles need a lot less feed, so about 30% less than the ewes with twins. So and feeding something like barley, provided we have a high protein forage, because remember our protein requirement is increasing as well, is probably adequate up until maybe 2 weeks before lambing. Certainly for the last 2 weeks we would need to be going in there with extra protein to bump that up. Now, the one thing that a lot of farmers would say, and that I would agree with, is that in a lot of cases, in particularly in kind of more productive flocks with higher litter sizes, we will be hoping to foster a triplet onto a lot of these singles, and in that case we need singles that are going to be ready to milk and rear 2 lambs. So like generally what I would say is an awful lot of farmers that are hoping to foster triplet and orphan lambs onto single bearing ewes will be feeding a little bit higher, because they're hoping to kind of drive on ewe condition and milk yield, so that the ewe is capable of carrying the second lamb. So that's the first thing. And look at, for most farms, where most of our sheep farmers have relatively modest flock sizes, the saving of going with a straight barley or something like that, unless it's homegrown barley and you have it, or for a lot of people it's about buying a compound feed, and that's being fed to most of the sheep on the farm, except maybe ram lambs. The leak bucket, I think leak buckets are quite useful where we put them out into hard to access places with sheep, for example, hill areas in late pregnancy, where the those kind of feed. It's a feed bucket, I suppose I'm talking about now, as opposed to a mineral bucket, where the feed bucket contains extra energy and protein that will increase the digestibility of the forage. So what we see in a lot of hill flocks, say, where, you know, it's just not practical maybe to get up there every day because the sheep are far away, putting out some of those buckets, you know, allows the sheep to get a little bit of extra energy and protein every day. But that extra energy and protein also then increases the digestibility of the forage that they're eating, because a lot of the forages up on the hills will be very poor quality. For lowland flocks, you know, and there's a lot of lowland flocks using those as well, it is a very expensive way of feeding sheep. Okay, so I absolutely accept that there is, you know, a convenience to that method of feeding. But I mean, if you look at that stuff on a per ton basis, it is many multiples of the cost of concentrate feed. You know, and then there's all that story about, you know, is every ewe getting her share, or the ewes coming and licking it? And, you know, what we see this time of the year, we were out with a couple of flocks there at the start of the week, you know, and some of those had buckets, feed buckets out with the ewes. And this time of the year, you know, it's something, it looks like something like the hippo pool in Dublin Zoo around that particular bucket after a couple of days. And, you know, just from a foot rot management, lameness point of view and all that, it is also challenging. So, you know, I'm going to leave it at that really with you, Ciaran. I'm going to say it's an expensive way of feeding sheep. If people are happy to pay that extra money, then, you know, that's fine, and that's their decision, and they're entitled to do that. But in terms of extra bang for your buck, I don't see anything extra in terms of if somebody went away and bought a good quality ration and fed 200 or 300 grams of that a day to ewes. They would probably be much better off financially.
Okay. Look, I'm conscious of time, but we just one or two quick questions. Mike, I might just keep you on the nutrition side for a minute. Look, something we've talked about before, coarse versus nut rations. I suppose you have to be conscious here, and even Damian touched on some ewes might be kept out for longer this year, you know, supplementing outside. Your preference there, any comments around that?
Yeah. Okay. So there's for and against both. So coarse rations, what we see with coarse rations is that it allows you to include kind of whole grains or slightly bruised or cracked grains, and that basically means when they go into the stomach, you don't get that explosion of starch and sugar that reduces the rumen pH very rapidly. So they can be safer with the coarse rations, and that's a positive. I suppose the other thing is they can be cheaper to manufacture. You know, you don't have to run them through the mill and pellet them and all that. So maybe from a manufacturing point of view, there might be advantages to them as well. On the flip side of that, they tend to attract more birds, especially if you're feeding them indoors. I find that if you're feeding a coarse ration, it's very hard to keep the crows and all the other birds out of the shed, and they end up rotivating the silage every day, looking for the little bits of ration that have fallen down through it. Sheep can sort the ingredients. So, you know, if there are ingredients in there that maybe aren't that palatable, you know, they'll sort them. Not so much a problem with ewes, but we'd see it a good bit with lambs, especially if they're being fed ad lib, that there's a particular part of the ration that they don't particularly like, and they leave that, and eventually that just builds up in the trucks and spills out in the ground, so there's wastage there. So look at, if we're feeding outside, you know, and this year I think most people probably would have to feed in troughs because it's just so wet. You know, obviously there's a benefit to nuts or cobs, because they're more robust. You know, don't spill out and things like that. So look, there's for and against. Personally, I'm a fan of just the pelleted feed, simply because, you know, of the issue with the crows, and the sorting, and as well as that, I suppose if you're really should be looking to have minerals included in the concentrate feed, and sometimes it can be hard to get the minerals to stay in the coarse ration, not to settle out during transport and during tipping or blowing or that type of thing.
Okay, Damon, I'm going to just come back to you. Look, you touched on straw being scarce this year. It's a commodity, we know. The use of alternatives, and unconscious in this, it depends on where you are and how available they are, but the like using sawdust maybe incorporating in with the bedding, is that a viable option to try and stretch out the bedding this year as an alternative?
Look, possibly. I mean, there has been work done before looking at alternative beddings. You know, in short, I suppose cleanliness was an issue with the alternatives, really. That it was difficult to replace straw. What you mentioned there maybe is a possibility in terms of stretching out. A strawberry won't be a full replacement for straw. That it may be getting a bit of sawdust down as on the ground as a soakage, and getting a bit of straw on top as well. Again, we mentioned liming earlier on. That can be that can be a big help in terms of keeping your bedding drier, and as mentioned earlier, the things like making sure your ventilation is right, and if you have I suppose drier or higher dry matter feed stuff available, maybe you're opting for that as opposed to wet bales of silage in terms of keeping using less straw if it's in scarce supply.
Okay. Just a quick comment, Damian. Look, using build up a bed and build up a bacteria, getting that cleaned out pre-lambing. How close would you go to pre-lambing for cleaning that out?
I'd be if you had to, and it is an issue again. If the bedding is building up, I'd be going a month pre-lambing if you could to give yourself a chance to have it re-limed and re-bedded again, and that it's settled, that it's keeping your
that bit of a barrier there again.
Barrier between the infection, yeah.
Okay. We've just done one other quick question and it came up. Maybe it's more applicable for our next webinar on flock health, but it's something we see every year. Maybe when we get the feed management right, we get our health treatments right, but we have a small cohort of ewes that get progressively thin in that kind of 2 to 3, 4 week period leading into lambing, despite getting everything else right, just getting thinner and thinner. Is there a case maybe for dealing with them separately, or what advice would you have for them? Maybe I'll throw that one to you, Michael.
Yeah, okay. So look at I suppose certainly any ewe that's losing body condition, we should try and identify them and feed them more. And the reason why that's important to do is that we want to stop the body condition loss. And what we've seen in all the research backs this up is that ewes that lose a lot of body condition in late pregnancy have poorer outcomes. So they have less milk yield, lower milk yield over the lactation, poor lamb performance, and a greater likelihood that they will lose one or two of their lambs. Won't bring them to weaning time. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So look at, often we look at health issues, and there are lots of underlying health issues that are difficult to detect. So, these kind of what we call iceberg diseases, things like UNAs or CLA or OPA, or even just bad teeth, or lame ewes. An awful lot of lame ewes around there this year. This year has been a really bad year for lameness. An awful lot of farmers are finding it very difficult to get on top of lameness. So ewes that are lame are not going to be able to feed and thrive. They're in pain, and things like that. So try to get on top of those type of issues. But certainly in late pregnancy care, if the ewe she has a big litter, like so 2 or more lambs, you can feed strong to try and reduce the body condition loss. And you're not too much worried about having the lambs too big, I suppose. But look at it, the ewe will partition an awful lot and that's the challenge in late pregnancy. Ewes will partition most of the energy they get into lamb growth, and not into body condition. And that's a natural phenomenon. We can't change that. But I prefer to shove in the feed than to allow the ewe to lose a lot more condition.
And look what you highlight there, some of them underlying conditions, some of them iceberg disease. Our colleagues in RVL are doing great work on that thin ewe survey. It's another option consider maybe post-lambing even some of those pioneer ewes.
Absolutely. So, farmers have ewes that are losing condition unexplained. Contact your regional vet lab, arrange to get them at a stage, look at if they're very close to lambing here now, let them lamb down, rear the lambs, if the lambs do, and then when you're finished with those ewes, when they have reared their lambs, arrange for them to go down to the RVL and they'll euthanize them and check to see is there any underlying diseases there. And once you identify that, then you can put in place a plan to deal with it.
That's the long-term health investment. Gentlemen, look, we'll have to finish it up at that point. There's certainly plenty of other areas we've touched on. I think it was a good comprehensive talk from both of you, some good practical tips on it. Thank you both for coming on. I'd like to thank our attendees, especially those who asked us questions. Hope we got around to most of them with you tonight. This recording will hopefully be available in the coming days. We intend to be back with you in the 10th of January. That's Wednesday, the 10th of January. We're going to cover some of the key aspects of flock health as we approach lambing. So, look, with that, we're going to leave tonight's webinar. Again, thanks very much for having come on. Michael, Damian, thanks for your contributions.
Thanks, Ciaran.
Thanks, Ciaran. Thank you.